All right. So our speaker tonight is John Barclay. And like I said, it's a little different take than we normally take. John said he's always created images, but he was never, quote unquote, a photographer. He told himself he wasn't creative, he wasn't artistic, his stick figures were failures. But he had this new camera and he wanted to learn how to use it. And on the first night of his first photo workshop, he stared in awe at the images shared by the group. The dream of being a good photographer was born. He sought out great photographers like Dan Sniffen, Tony Sweet, Nancy Rottenberg, and emulated them, listened to them, learned from them. But he became a photographer in his own right when Nancy forbade him to look through anyone else's viewfinder for the entire duration of a trip to Africa. She said, follow your vision and make the pictures that only you can see. Based on that experience, he created his program Dream, Believe, Create to reflect that artistic journey. He began that journey with very few skills, but aspired to be better. He watched and learned and gained a bit of confidence, and then began to see photography not only as a reflection of the world, but also as a representation of the reality inside of him. His photographic journey freed him to create what was uniquely his, being genuinely aware of the beauty around him as he looks through his lens, feeds his soul, and brings him great joy. He encourages the participants in his workshops to share that journey and discover the artists residing inside each of them. Following that inner eye, he photographs whatever makes his heart sing. He has explored diverse subjects and continues to learn processing techniques that bring his visions to life. He is eager to share his journey with us tonight. And with that, John, take it away.
Okay, well, thank you so much to Singh-Ray, who I love. Thank you for inviting me back. I've done one other of this. This is a new lecture, actually. I've only done it, I want to say once, but maybe twice, actually, twice. But it's one that's near and dear in my heart. And my lectures come from my experiences, because that's really all I know how to talk about, right? Is the journey I've had with photography. And my hope is that some of the stories that I'll share tonight might be motivational and inspirational to you, or with this particular discussion, maybe even cause you to think about how you approach photography or your creation or creative journey. Really doesn't even have to be photography. So let's get started with that. Let's share my screen here and see if we can't bring you on a little bit of a journey tonight. And as our host said, it's a little different. This is not a how-to type of lecture at all. It's really a type of lecture I would want to go listen to, which is more of a motivational, inspirational lecture. There's all sorts of capabilities out there to learn the technical aspects of photography. So this is called Through the Lens of Love. Kind of interesting, right? Who talks about love in photography? Well, I do. And I am kind of known nowadays for this little phrase called photograph what makes your heart sing. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So what do I want to cover? I couldn't help but play with these transitions. I think they're silly, but we'll do it. So, the lecture comes from me kind of observing others in workshops. I've done, over a couple of hundred of those. And also, again, from my own personal experience. And then, why love? I'm hoping to maybe open up your eyes to this potential and possibility of love. And we're going to talk about what lens do you see the world through, and also then what do you see your photography through? And a little bit about my journey towards this concept that I'd like to share with you tonight. And then a little bit more about how we see more deeply than just maybe what we might think about as superficially. And we'll also talk about some of the obstacles that might get in the way sometimes of deeper seeing, or to a journey to maybe a different place, and some suggestions along the way. So the first question is this: what lens do you see the world through? Maybe you've never even thought about that. Well, I helped to co-lead a contemplative photography retreat, and that's really the question that we're talking about for an entire week. How do you see the world? How do you show up as a photographer? What lens, in other words, do you see? Let me get you there a little bit, hopefully. Do you see the world through the lens of love? It's my granddaughter. Do you see the world through this deep connection that you might have to subject matter that you're connected to, right? So horses, I grew up with horses. I'm very deeply connected to horses. Do you see the world in front of you or around you through a lens of beauty? I know DeWitt Jones talks about, what would he die for? Beauty. Do you see it through a sense of wonder? Is that why you show up to to the world or greet the world through the eyes of wonder or even awe at just the incredible majesty that's before us as a landscape photographer? And then a little deeper now, what lens do you see your image making or your photography through? And that could be anything. And I want to be really clear. There's no right or wrong answer to any of these questions. But I'm afraid of most people don't spend time ever even asking the questions. And great photographers do. They're spending a lot of time. So let me see if I can't make a few suggestions there. Do you see your photography through an actual physical lens? Maybe that's how you see things. You see things as my buddy Dan, my tour partner for many years. He saw everything through a telephoto lens. That's kind of how he saw the world, in this compressed telephoto way, and very beautiful with images like this. Or sometimes I run into people who just see the world through wide angle, and they're really good at it. And they can see these big, expansive scenes like these. And so that's how they show up to make photographs. Nancy Rotenberg, who was mentioned in the beginning here, she was my mentor. She was a fabulous, fabulous macro photographer. That's how she saw the world. We traveled together to South Africa once, and on that trip where she told me I had to see the world through my own vision and stop looking through everybody's viewfinder. But at the same time, she gave herself the task of looking at the world outside of a macro lens, the way she saw the world, and to use a wide angle lens only to try to see more broadly. She ended up throwing the lens away at the end of the trip. It was really hard for her. She saw the world through a macro lens. Or you might be absolutely in love with color, and you see the world in a very vibrant color. There's other photographers. My friend Sherry Mabe is a brilliant infrared landscape photographer. And man, she sees the world through, we go to places where it's in your face color, and I'm yelling at her, aren't you going to shoot this in color? And she says, no, I see everything in infrared. Or maybe black and white. That's what I was weaned on. I just love black and white photography, and that's can be how I see the world. See, with color rather, we look at the photograph. With black and white, we look into the soul of the photograph. So for me, sometimes stripping away color, which sometimes can get in the way of what really I'm drawn to, black and white becomes how you might see the world. You might see the world through the lens of others, especially as you're new to photography and you're learning, you might see an image like this I saw of Tony Sweet's. And so I felt like I wanted to run out and just copy Tony Sweet. And while that's not where you probably want to be the best Tony Sweet copy artist, I would hope that you could blaze your own path, and we'll talk a little bit about more about that. But in the beginning, for lots of people, it's real to go see images that you may have seen before and copy those. Other people are taught the rules, and they really want to operate within those rules. I'm an anti-rule guy. My phrase is, whose rules, who made the rules, and why do you feel you must follow those rules? I prefer to look at them as guidelines. So I'm going to tell a very quick story. Cole Thompson and I were out in Death Valley leading a workshop together, as we do. And there was a woman over in this particular area, in the basin area. And I thought I was going to be in her way, so I kept walking away from her. And finally, I got close enough. I yelled over. I said, am I in your way, in your shot? Because I don't want to be in your shot. And she finally worked her way over to me, and she said, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm having a blast with these reflections. And she said, and I kid you not, don't you know you need a foreground, a midground, and a background? And it caused me to go, huh? That's not how I photograph. I don't photograph based on what you should do or shouldn't do. I photograph what feels right, what makes my heart sing. But she saw the world through rules. And as a matter of fact, I later learned that she was an MFA of photography, so a master of fine art in photography. But I thought it was sad that she was trying to tell me how I needed to make an image that had a foreground. So rules, while some people might like to follow them, I'm not sure that's the best approach as you're starting to develop your own style and make images that are your own vision. So I'm all over the map here, right? Black and white and color and infrared. Some people love just technology. There's a lot of folks out there who love technology, and I do too. And so they come to photography because they just fall in love with infrared and really want to learn everything about it, or they want to learn the technical nuances of how do you photograph aurora. We're going to be up there, and actually I leave for Sunday for this location up in Yellowknife. And so they love, the technical aspects of photography. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. And learning how to post-process to make it look exactly like you saw. Again, there's no right and wrongs. I might have hinted that I think rules are wrong, but if that's what you want, I'm not gonna sway you another way. Or dare I say, you might be trying to make even art with your photography. That might be another right answer, if you will. And this one and maybe this one might fall into a category of fine art. For me, fine art falls in the eye of the beholder of your imagery. It's not for you to decide, or me to decide, at least in this case. Or some people, like my dear friend Dan, he loved Photographic Society of America, and he loved to do competitions. And he enjoyed gaining those accolades from competition and rising to a level of master in the Photographic Society of America. All of these are perfectly fine answers. I'm just inviting you to ask the question, why? Or even more importantly, the real question was, how do you see your photography? Through what lens? Metaphorical lens, if you will. Some people have to make a living, right, with photography, and so they need to use their photography to help fund the mortgage or make payments. So there's nothing wrong with that. Some people have listened to my buddy Cole Thompson, who, by the way, if you know him and you have access to him, could you please get him to cut his hair? He hasn't cut it since COVID started. That's my one dig at Cole Thompson tonight. I'll try not to do any more than that. But if anybody knows that we're dear friends and we like to rib each other back and forth. So there's no malicious intent here, just good fun. But vision's a great thing. And we'll talk a little bit more about vision in the future. He looks cute, Michelle Shambier says. He doesn't look cute. But vision is another way to come at photography. And if you've listened to Cole's great lecture, Why Black and White, or he talks about vision, you'll know what that is. But I'll give you a little thought, some thoughts about what vision is here as we get to that section in this program tonight. Okay. So let's talk about my journey to what I say is the lens that I look through, which is this lens of love. So how did that happen? Well, that happened first and foremost by learning the craft of photography, learning, f-stops and shutter speeds and depth of field, and how do I convert things to black and white? How do I shoot macro scenes or small scenes? How do I see in a broad, wide angle way? Right, that was a journey that was difficult. I remember being with my mentor Nancy Rotenberg and on some of those first workshops that I took, and I just could not understand why I needed to add light to light and dark to dark because the meter only saw 18% gray. And she got so stinking frustrated with me. She shook me by my lapels, literally grabbed my shirt and shook me and said, be the camera, John, be the camera. And I'm like, I'm trying to be the camera. I'm trying. I really am. It was really hard, right? But we need to master that craft part of photography so it gets out of the way. And so that's what I like to say next is we need to understand the craft or technique so well that we're freed from those constraints and we're liberated to pursue our vision or what makes our heart sing, or so that we can see through this lens of love, potentially for you too, right? So that might start, like I said, by copying other people, seeing Tony's picture and making that photo. That's a good start. Seeing the Wanaka willow over in New Zealand, or seeing other people's images of the aurora, or being in the Palouse, right? It's perfectly fine, but that should be short-lived in my mind, right? We should learn enough about technique that we're kind of liberated to pursue the vision that we want to pursue, and we get a little bit of learning by others. But then I started to learn to believe in me. That took time, and that took Nancy's help, because believing that I could be a good photographer was hard, because as the bio in the beginning said, I still can't make a good stick figure. My 10-year-old granddaughter, who's very artistic, laughs when I honestly try at church. When we're sitting together, she's drawn on this little thing that it erases. It's old like an Etch-a-Sketch, but it's not. You write on it. And my things are terrible. So I really didn't believe I had creative capabilities. But over time and through much of Nancy's assistance, I was understanding that I just, because I couldn't believe it, I couldn't connect with those capabilities that I truly had. So it took time, and some of you might have a stronger belief system or more sure of yourself, and that'll be a big bonus. But I can promise you this, we all have those capabilities to be creative. And then I met Cole Thompson, and we started to have lengthy conversations about vision together. We both had been thinking about this topic for a long time, but then when we started to work together and become good friends, we started to think more deeply. So we're a little different in the way we think about vision, but we're pretty close. So what is it? Well, in a simple sentence, vision is the unique way that you see the world based on your life experiences. So that means your vision is made up of your religious belief, political beliefs, education, upbringing, where you live, the books you've read, the movies you've seen, like Ansel Adams talks about, the news you consume. All of that makes up who you are as a human being. And what happens is we bring that to anything that we create. So we each have our own unique vision, and we all have one. We've all been influenced by all these things. Have we thought deeply about that? Probably not. So the invitation is to do that. There's no right or wrong vision. Somebody's vision isn't better than mine or yours, right? But here's what you do is you bring your vision with you when you make photographs. You can't avoid it. It's not possible. And what you can do, though, is you can start to think about the influences in your life. So somebody says to a musician, who are your influences? They might say Bach and Beethoven and Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan or whatever. That's all I'm seriously asking you here, is a little deeper than that, but to think about what have been your influences, whether it be the books you've read, the movies you've seen, photographers you've studied. That's what you're bringing to the act of photography, ultimately bringing you. As ugly as I am in that picture, that's me being a goofball with a wide angle lens. But so what I ultimately did with all of that journey was I put it together, and I realized that what really brings me joy and what really turns my head or makes me say, wow, which is what I like to photograph, is love. Love for obviously Abigail, who's now 10, but falling in love with her as a grandchild, it becomes easy to then want to make these types of images of her. So here are some suggestions then along this path. So you might be asking those questions. What do you love? What does it take? It takes being open, being still, being vulnerable. Let's explore. Being open, even though I'm not a people photographer, going to Cuba was exhilarating. Really hard the first time. By the fifth time, it was so much joy because I learned to be open to being taken. Because isn't that really what's happening? We're not taking photographs, we're being taken by something. I walked by this little building in or opening in a building in Cuba, and I'm like, holy cow, I couldn't walk another step. I pivoted right, set up a tripod, and made a photograph. I was taken. I didn't take anything. And I think that was a pivot for me in my photography, to realize that the more open I am to seeing that shadow as I'm walking up the stairs at this beautiful museum we have in town where I live here, I just had to stop and make a photograph, or being taken by these beautiful ballet dancers in Cuba. But what does it take to be open? Oftentimes it takes being still. Being still. You know, the Indians go into the woods, as their stories are, they go into the woods, and you know, if you do that, the rabbits scatter, the birds go away, the deer run away, everything goes. But if you sit on a stump for about 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, what happens? It all comes back, right? And so it's the same way with photography. We show up and we make that handshake shot, but my goodness, we're at this wall of color in the Smokies, and you know, the more I sit, the more still I am, the more I see. So being still, being open to being taken, this was hard. These dancing birch trees, as I call them in Acadia, they're hard to make into a nice, tidy composition. It took time. I had to be still and allow myself to see more deeply than just superficially. So we're talking about this idea of being open, being still, and then maybe being vulnerable too. Vulnerable to putting yourself in situations that are not necessarily comfortable, like people photography for me. I feel like I'm being an ogre of a male photographing women. It's incredibly uncomfortable for me. I'd much rather photograph Mel out at the Hideout Ranch, where we do a workshop every other year, and it's a blast. We do running horses in the snow, and we do portraits, but I've got to be vulnerable doing those portraits of these great cowboys and cowgirls out there, because it's not what I'm comfortable doing. But when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, I think it allows us to grow as a photographer. And if we're vulnerable with all of these feelings of who we are as a human, and we apply those to our photography, then I think that's when our imagery grows and enhances. So my suggestion then is to be more open to letting those images come to you. I'm just walking down the street in Cuba. I have no intention whatsoever. What I'm trying to be is open. And I see this and I'm falling in love. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is just a wonderful scene. And then that car slips by and gives that swish of motion behind it. If you don't believe me, or some of this feels a little kind of odd to talk about, and I suspect it does to some, here's Bresson. A photograph is neither taken nor seized by force. If it offers itself up, question I always have is, are you ready? Are you open? And Ernst Haas says, you don't take pictures. The good ones happen to you. I love that quote. How true is that? Good images happen, and they happen because you're open to that possibility of happen. You're open to the possibility of being taken by backlit evergreens and knowing if you get those beautiful edges and you go black and white, it's going to happen. Or pointing to a very different location out of Momi in the island of Molokai, where we do the contemplative photography retreat. And just this, it's, you know, my head is saying, I can't photograph right there. I'm looking right into the sun. But then I just engage my brain with, okay, well, how do I make that happen? And I make that happen and I get another right answer by something I'm taken by. You know, I show this image from the Palouse. I love this image. Most don't. It's okay. And that's another point I want to make very clear. It has, I hope you get to a place in your photography where it's for you. It's not for the masses, but please put it out for the masses, but don't worry about what others are saying about your work. Share the love that you're or the images that you're falling in love with. And maybe this will help. This is a Ricky Cook from our retreat. Ricky's property and Bronwyn's property. He says, photograph wow. I love that. I say photograph what makes your heart sing. But photographing wow simply means as you're wandering around and you say wow in your head or out loud, here's the rule. You've got to stop and make a photograph. And it doesn't matter whether that photograph is good or bad. That's not the point. It's training yourself to pay attention to wow and photograph that. Or you might call it photograph what turns your head. It's the same concept either. So if you're not verbal and you're not saying wow in your head or out loud, then pay attention to when you go like that and you go, oh, that's really cool. Well, if that's what you're doing, you got to stop and make a photograph. I mean, how do you not say wow when this is happening out on the ocean in a really stormy day out on Cape Cod? Or I like to say, or to those moments of perception. I was walking over the bridge to go photograph what's it up in Yellowstone? What is it? You walk over that bridge and you go to Grand Prismatic Spring. But as I'm going over, I had that moment. I just looked to my left and I went, holy cow, the fumaroles are just going crazy. And that's a moment of perception. Well, guess what? I stopped, set up my tripod, and I made images here. I never made it to Grand Prismatic Spring. I'm thankful I didn't, because I consider this one of the best images I've ever made. 150 hot photographers walked right by the scene. Why? Because they're not training themselves to pay attention to wow, what turns their head, or these moments of perception. A great trip I do with the brilliant Josh Cripps and I do New Zealand together. And we back a boat up to Sterling Falls. And again, this is from our winter photography at the Hideout Ranch. And it's a blast to do that one. And so those are all turning my head. There's moments of perception that are happening that I'm falling in love with. So I'm just inviting you to photograph what makes your heart sing, and whatever that is. And it's going to be different for you than it is for me. And that's wonderful, because that way we have all these unique and different images rather than all have the same images. So I'll finish up with just a couple of more here of things that make my heart sing. Oh my gosh, I put a lot of them in there. I promise I'm almost done here. Here we go. So let's learn to see more deeply. And I wish that I could bring great pearls of wisdom, but there's nobody better than my friend Freeman Patterson. I mean, he is a great photographer and a great writer. So let me share what Freeman says about this topic. Freeman says, seeing in the finest and broadest sense means using your senses, your intellect, and your emotions. So it's not just understanding technical stuff, right? It's not understanding how to make a good composition. In the broadest sense, he's saying means using your senses, all of them, your intellect and your emotions. It means encountering your subject matter with your whole being. It means looking beyond the labels of things. It's not a pretty or beautiful face or an ugly face. It's just an oval is what it is. That label gets in the way. It's not a evergreen tree. It's a triangle. right? So get rid of those labels and just look at them for what they are and how they might be building blocks in your composition, and discover that remarkable world around you. But be careful, there's this ability to see more deeply, as Freeman is talking about, comes with a couple of cautions, and that is that you have outside noise called the internet and social media, which is getting in the way of your ability to see more deeply. So it requires some time and getting away from all that stimuli of sometimes social media, or all the negativity of that, or all the critique of that. So be careful with all those things that are going on that are getting in the way of your ability to see more deeply. Seeing more deeply, as Freeman is talking about, means how do you show up? What do you bring to this act of photography? How do you show up mentally, spiritually, physically? All of that, right? How are you showing up to make photographs? It's a really valid question. So let's go to a couple of quotes, see if we can't build on this concept a little bit. Ernst says, the limitations of photography are in yourself. For what we see is only what we are. And I believe that wholeheartedly now. We are a product of who we are. It's the same thing I'm talking about. It's a little more succinctly put there. Ansel Adams talks about it as well. But there are a couple of obstacles, and we need to kind of pay attention to those. So what are some of those obstacles? FUD, as I like to call it, fears, uncertainties, and doubts, or lack of confidence. You might think about it that way. Rules, you getting in the way of your photography. I'm good at that one. Comparison to others, technical knowledge, expectations. These are all things, those labels that I just spoke about, that we got to be careful of. So let's put a little meat on a couple of those. Fears, uncertainties, and doubts. Be careful with those feelings of inadequacy and uncertainty and doubt. You're right where you need to be on your journey with photography. And don't let somebody else next to you going, "Ooh, my gosh, that's great." And you're going, "What? I have no idea." So be open, right? Those things that we've been talking about. But more importantly, with this idea of feeling inadequate and so forth, it's real. We all have that feeling. But what I want you to do with that from here on forth is, or from here moving forward, is to meet that lovingly. Recognize it and say, wow, I'm just totally feeling inadequate right now because I'm next to Lucy and Stephen, and my gosh, their work is so good. I'll never make an image like theirs. Nope. That's not the right approach. The right approach is, my gosh, someday I want to be where they are, and I'm just going to keep working at it. I'm going to keep doing the best I can. I'm going to keep experimenting. I'm going to keep trying, because see, failure is success and progress, right? Failure is a resource. It helps you to find the edge of your capacities. So be willing to fail over and over and over and over again. What's the thing? 10,000 things you got to do, right, in order to become good at anything? It's really true. So be careful of those feelings of inadequacy and meet them very gently and kindly, and recognize that failures that you might be having, and look at it that way instead, and realize how much you're going to grow. Be careful of comparison. Teddy Roosevelt said it best. Comparison is the thief of joy. And boy, is that true. Sometimes comparison can be helpful. I put up a little reel. I've been doing some photography, little snippets about a minute long, and I talked about this comparison is the thief of joy, and somebody had a different take on it. And there are times when comparison can help you grow. But I'm afraid, from my experience personally, and then from many others that I speak to, it can be this thief of joy. So be careful, again, especially on the internet and social media, putting up images and maybe getting some negative feedback or some criticism. That means they're coming from their perspective and how they see things. You know, don't compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to your vision of what you want your work to be. Again, comparison is the thief of joy. And let's avoid labels. You know, I talked about a few of them, but it's not good or bad. Like, it's not, wow, that's really good light. Freeman Patterson, when I studied with him in South Africa, made that abundantly clear. We were going to photograph the poppies, one of the things I really wanted to do because I loved Freeman's multiple exposures. And so I couldn't wait to go, but I was dumbfounded that we were leaving at 11 o'clock for an hour's drive to go to the poppy field. And I looked at Freeman and said, why are we going so late? The harsh light. This is terrible light. And he looks at me and says, I never thought about it that way. And I knew that moment I was at the foot of a master, and he was in a teaching moment. He says, John, I don't think about light as good or bad or harsh, or he says, it's just light. It's my job to do something with that. But see, labeling it as good or bad immediately puts us in that place of, it's harsh midday sun, I'm going to go have a beer, right? But that's not the right approach. It's harsh midday sun. What do I do with this? How do I use this to the best of my ability? And it's not pretty or ugly truck or a pretty or ugly face, right? It's an oval, or it's squares and rectangulars, right? So be careful of naming things. Rather see them as shapes, is what I learned from Freeman. Again, not good light, bad light, it's just light. And be careful of letting people tell you what you should and shouldn't do, or you can and can't do. I was at Longwood Gardens with a group of other teachers. We were all part of the Out of Chicago group. And it's 104 degrees. It's bright noonday sun, not a cloud in the sky. We're all sweating to death because it's humid. It's August. But I said, you guys go ahead and have lunch. I see something. And they said, John, you can't make a photograph there. It's incredibly contrasty. And it's like glare up the wazoo. I said, yeah, I think I can. And I spent some time and I underexposed it by 3 stops to get rid of the glare. And I knew I'd get these little points around the lily pad. It was just, so I'm not going to pay attention, right, to what they think I should and shouldn't do with my photography. And the other one is to be careful with expectations. It's a killer, but we all do it. I still do it. I mean, I find some of these images that I love and I show up at the location, but I don't get fog and I'm disappointed because they had fog, right? But so, boy, that's a killer, because now you're immediately disappointed rather than open to being taken, right? How do you get taken when you're sitting there in tears because you don't have fog, right? We showed up at this incredible location in New Zealand and we got fog. I didn't want fog at all. And so I sat still. I practiced these things that I'm sharing with you. I really did. And all of a sudden I said, oh my gosh, this is like so zen right now. And I love this photograph because it just is this peaceful moment I had. And I remember being up at Steptoe Butte and saying, my gosh, I've been here for 20 years almost. And I'm like, I'm done photographing from Steptoe Butte. And I said, no, wait a minute. I'm an infrared photographer now. I'm going to play with that. Or being over in Scotland and finding these beautiful leading lines, or in Ireland. You all have experiences and talents that are exclusive to you. You need to believe that you do. You need to trust that you do. Because everybody does, excuse me. We all have moments of inspiration, and we all have, some people are better technically than others. Some people, by the way, are you guys, I'm just noticing here, are you seeing my screen that has, I'm wondering if this is, hang on a second, why can I not? Yeah, I'm just noticing oh, I gotta get my mouse to go here. Where is the mouse? There it is. Is that showing better? Can somebody give me a thumbs up or something? Have I been doing this whole thing on the wrong screen?
It was showing better before. Now I can see the.
Oh, okay. I had it right. Good. Let me see if I got to get that back, because it looked like my screen was showing the wrong thing. Hold on. Doggone it. Hold on, I'm gonna have to do this, I think. Sorry about that. Where is that? There's a little thing that should come up on my screen, but it's not coming up. I apologize, go ahead, folks. We'll go backwards on this for a second. Where is that thing that I want to go over here? It was better before, so it was right. So now it's on. Hang on. I don't understand why I can never see my mouse on my other screen. Well, let's come over here. See if I click over here. What is going on? Sorry, folks. I wonder if I can change it here. No. Oh, there it is. It's hiding behind us. Got it. All right. Are we back again?
We are back. Yes.
Golly, that was embarrassing. It was going so well, too. And we'll have that on the recording. Hopefully you can snip that out of there. I apologize.
No worries.
Okay. So you are seeing the whole screen now, not my notes and everything. Good. So here's a great way to think about showing up. Nice little, concise way to do it. When out photographing, it's with a sense of play, no bounds in sight, anything's possible, and the unexpected welcome. Isn't that a great way to think about showing up to make photographs? A sense of play, just be open. My buddy Jack Davis talks about having a box of 64 crayons. Remember when we got those, how cool that was, right? And you just play as a kid. We easily do that as a child. It's a lot harder as an adult. I don't know why. So what we need to do then is we need to master the technical aspects and develop our vision. Then we need to open our heart to the possibility of photographing through this lens of love that we've been talking about. And now my invitation then is to go out and make images that make your heart sing. So thank you for spending some time. Sorry that just totally bumbled at the end there, but better at the end, I guess, than in the beginning or the middle. I'm very happy to take some time with you and answer some questions. You can find me on, or you can write to me at johnbarclayphotome.com. The website is Barclay Photo. I do have a newsletter. I stink at getting newsletters out, so you're not going to be inundated with newsletters. And I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and I need to add Vero. Vero, V-E-R-O, has become my favorite place to be. And it's a lot better for photographers, and people are flocking there. We tried it in 2018. It didn't go real well. And again, the reason I'm doing this for Singh-Ray tonight is I am a Singh-Ray ambassador. I adore Singh-Ray. I go back a long time with Singh-Ray. That's all I carry for my filters. I hope when you have needs for filters, that you'll make sure that Singh-Ray is who you're going to be paying attention to, because they make the best products on the market. So let me do this and get out of this, stop sharing, so you can actually see me. And I can see, wow, there's 92 people here. Hello, everybody.
So we did have a couple of questions pop up already. If
Yeah.
anyone else has some, put them in the Q&A window.
Okay, I'll go there.
Early on, when you were talking about the different styles, the IR and the macro and all of that, they want to know, should you study each style and then see which better fits your personality or which brings your best work?
This is where Cole and I disagree a little bit. I think, Cole would say that he doesn't look at anybody else's work, and because he wants to do what he calls honest work. And I admire that greatly in him. I, on the other hand, really like to look at other people's work because I find it incredibly inspiring. But when we're talking about a style, to me, a style develops over time. I think sometimes people think about style and they say, I want to have HDR grungy looking images and that's my style. To me, that's more of a look that you're creating. A style kind of evolves. And there are photographers that I'm familiar with who, when I see their image, I know it's my buddy Bill Strom, who's no longer with us. I would know a Bill Strom image in a heartbeat. And there was nothing, he never spent time thinking about style. he spent time thinking about what he fell in love with the photograph, and he developed a style organically and naturally over time. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question or not, but that's my thought on style. I think it happens organically, and if that means you're looking at other people and you're inspired by that, like I am by Cole Thompson's work and Chuck Kimmerly's work and Mitch DeBrowner's work. I love their black and white work. There's no question that has influenced some of my work, but I would hope mine is setting or standing apart from theirs as well, that my style, and I think style is highly influenced by who you are as a human being, right? And being honest and true. Somebody's saying, do you lecture with DeWitt and Molokai? Yes, I do the contemplative photography retreat at the Hui Ho'olana, which I think you're talking about. And I took over for DeWitt. He invited me to come and take over his spot when he retired from doing those lectures. But he does come and spend time with us. Generally, he not as much as he used to because he's getting older and he's had some health issues. But that's exactly where I am. Yes. Okay, so I want to make sure. Oh, you got rid of that. That's okay. So that's the other question. Any other ones? Answered. I'm going to go back to that answered. I just want to make sure to look at that again.
Oh, there was a question about Vero, and I answered that person directly with a link. So they
perfect. Yeah, VERO. So it's another social media outlet is what it is. It's like Instagram used to be. You can there's no algorithms. So you follow who you want to follow, and that's who you're following. Those are the images you see. So it's going to take you time. Hi, Barry. Good to see you again. You're going to follow who you want. So it's take you some time to build that. But you've probably been seeing people on Instagram saying, hey, I'm over on Vero, and it's got a picture of them. You can make that little postcard in Vero, share it on Instagram, share it on Facebook, and say, hey, I'm over there too. And you don't have to deal with ads and algorithms. It's just and the interaction there is wonderful right now. It's great. Highly recommend it.
Where are you based out of, John?
I'm in Philadelphia, well, north of Philadelphia in Bucks County, and grew up in Massachusetts. I never had that wicked hardcore Boston accent, but I'm a wicked hardcore Red Sox fan, wicked hardcore. But I had two New Yorkers for parents, and so it canceled out everything that I was hearing at school. And thankfully, I never got that hash accent from Avid. But I do lead lectures. I do those for many clubs, and then my wife and I lead workshops all over the world right now, and we're thankful to be traveling again. So that's good. Hi, Daphne, by the way.
And Andrew wants to know, what filters do you like best?
Well, I can never, it's funny. I started out with film. I'm a dinosaur. And so I always had Singh-Ray, a warming polarizer, because we wanted a little bit of that warming with our film days. So I've had that forever, and I finally got a neutral polarizing filter. And then they have the new infused, which is kind of cool because I was never a big fan of the color intensifying. It just didn't work for me. Others people worked really well for. Maybe I'm just not smart enough, but I like the infused polarizer. Does a much better job. So I like the infused polarizer. I carry it. I carry now a neutral because we have digital, and it's really easy to do all those changes versus the film days, right? And then I'm a huge fan, like Cole is, of long exposure. So I carry a 5-stop, a 10-stop, and a 15-stop more slow. Those are fabulous, right? And Cole, if you follow him, he likes 13 stops. So he'll have like a 10. And I think Singh-Ray, if I'm not mistaken, made him a 3-stop. So he has that magic 13. But with a 10-stop, I'm generally pretty good for midday stuff. And then if I want a little more, I just throw a polarizer on. And the lighter, brighter polarizer, is not quite as dark as a traditional polarizer, but I still get that. I'm pretty close to that 13 stops. I'm at whatever, 11 and a half or 11 3/4, and I get what I need typically. But that's generally the kit that I'm carrying with me right there. Good question. Where do you base out of? What else there?
And then, are you at the Hui during the April session?
I am not. That's been a group that's been doing that forever. I mean, that's kind of the core group that started the whole Hui. That's Ricky and Jack Davis and Teresa Airy Jonathan Kingston. Jonathan Kingston and I started, so when I took over, when DeWitt asked me to come to the Hui, Jonathan Kingston and I did a thing together, and then I met Flint Sparks, who's on the board of directors there, and he's a Zen priest and a pretty darn good photographer. And I saw the need for this contemplative photography retreat, so I brought that idea up to Flint, and we've been doing that every year now. Every December is our time slot, so early December.
And what is your favorite wide lens?
I'm a Fuji photographer, not on the GFX. I'm an X series guy, and so I adore my 10-24. That's what I live for, and I love wide angle photography. So my 10 gives me 15, right, in a crop sensor. I'm toying with getting their, what is it? They have an 8 to something, and I've played with it, but I just haven't had the need really to do that. But the 10-24, and then on the other side of the world, I love my 100-400 because I like small scene work, and a 100-400 is great for small scenes and isolating things. So those tend to be my two go-to lenses. I have everything in between. I love macro, but those two lenses are when I'm out doing landscape photography. But for Yellowknife specifically, and Raymond, if you're still there, I went and bought a dedicated 10mm. Again, that's 15, but it's a 2.8 lens for that aurora work that we'll be doing in night sky work, because I just needed a faster lens. The 10-24 is an f4 lens. It's not a 2.8. So if you're going to do night sky and aurora, you might want to get a faster lens for that.
Do you
Good.
use
I see Raymond's here.
film simulations?
I'm sorry, say that again.
You use Fujifilm simulations?
It's part of the reason I love Fuji. I think so Fuji in my mind was a great color company, right? They made great film. We loved Velvia and Provia, and their film simulations in my mind are spot on. So when I bring my images into Lightroom, I'm bringing them in with Provia, because that's what you're seeing through your viewfinder in a Fuji. You're seeing the Provia film simulation in your LCD or on your LCD and in your EVF. And I just love the way they render colors, especially blue skies. They're to me, they look right.
And do you like tilt shift lenses for art?
You know, I have not I've never owned a tilt shift lens in my life. I've lusted after one. I've just never gotten one. Good questions.
Very good questions. It looks like we're wrapping up. I just want to say what a nice, refreshing presentation this was. We have just about every presenter every month. When someone asks, what should the ISO be? What should this be? They say, you know what? The image that you love is the correct setting.
Yes.
Whatever makes you love it. And this was a really deep dive into basically what everyone says. So
yeah, I mean, again, we need to have that technical knowledge. It's critical. So those are good questions, right? They're valid questions. I was there where I didn't understand, and I would ask Tony Sweet when I was taking workshops with him many moons ago, you know, what lens do I get? As I got out of the car, because I just didn't know, right? So that's real. But learn that technical aspects, you know, practice, so that it gets out of the way and you can start to discover the things that hopefully made sense tonight. And because that's where everything's going to change for you. That's when it changed for me dramatically, is when I get out of that technical headspace and started following my heart. Then I thought my images made more sense to me. And it certainly seems like the response to those was a little more positive.
right. And then looks like last question of the night. How do you capture your wave images?
Those are hard. We do those in Molokai at the Hui at the retreat. If we have good weather, and generally December, if we have good waves. December through February is great. That's why we love to go there. And so here's the deal. So it's a little complicated. So here's what it is. You've got to be on auto ISO setting. So you're going to float your ISO. So you're going to have your shutter speed at 0.002 of a second. You're going to have your f-stop at f8, and then you're going to float your ISO so that you lock in the sharpness you want with your f-stop, but also want to stop the waves with 0.002 of a second. I'm allowing that. So instead of aperture priority or shutter priority, I'm essentially an ISO priority. right? That's what I'm doing. And I can, interesting with ISO priority, you can still, because those waves are bright, I can still check on my first 2 or 3 images and say, hey, they're still a little bright with an average meter reading. I need to use my exposure compensation dial on my Fuji or whatever you do in the menu and make sure to bring that back into where it needs to be. And at that point, I can just fire away, multiply. I'm shooting on either high or low speed continuous, because those waves are happening really fast, and you've got to predict, when it's going to happen. And you shoot way more bad ones than you shoot good ones. But man, is it a party when you get a good one. It's a blast.
I love it. I love it. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here with us tonight. I definitely want to thank you, John, for presenting tonight. I think you've provided a lot of inspiration and guidance,
Good.
and we've gotten lots of thanks in the chat. So just thank you to everyone involved, and have a really great night.
Thank you, Lance. That was a nice compliment. I appreciate that. I didn't have a chance to look through all those, but I'll take a look when I can. Thank you so much, everybody. Go make images that make your heart sing and have a party. It's a blast. Follow me on Instagram. No, I don't really care. It's all right. Follow me if you wish. Take care.